Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
The foreign ministers of India and China have had a 3-hour conversation in Moscow. Important thing is that while the two sides have had many conversations at the top level, National Security Advisor and Special Rep from the other side for border talks, the two foreign ministers, the two defense ministers also, it is the first time that the two sides have issued a joint statement. That is progress. So there is a 5-point joint statement that I'm sure most of you have read about. I will repeat that. But this is an important progress. Now the important thing to notice in what's gone on in the past 4 months before we get started with today's Cut the Clutter is that the two sides have never stopped talking. Even when they fight at night, the coming morning, commanders from two sides talk, or the Joint Commission on Border from both sides talks, or the top ministers or officials or special representatives from two sides talk. So this is a strange situation. Mao Zedong may have said talk, talk, fight, fight, but this is, I think, a little bit more of talk, talk, threaten, threaten. Fighting besides at one in Galwan, we haven't seen any, and I think both sides realize, India as well as China, that they went too far, that Galwan, things went out of control, should not happen again. So positive news is that talks are going on. The two sides have never stopped talking. This is unlike what happens sometimes between India and Pakistan, which is an important point. So that reminds me of a line that from Ali Sardar Jafri, the Urdu poet, that Mr. Inder Gujral had once quoted to Nawaz Sharif in one of his summit meetings, which was गुफ्तगू बंद ना हो, बात से बात चले, सुबह तक शाम में मुलाकात चले. पर उसकी लास्ट लाइन बड़ी इंटरेस्टिंग है, हम पे हंसती हुई ये तारों भरी रात चले. तो फिर से गुफ्तगू बंद ना हो, बात से बात चले, सुबह तक शाम में मुलाकात चले, हम पे हंसती हुई ये तारों भरी रात चले. So while it's okay to carry on these talks, it should not be that they lead to nothing. So ultimately, the world around you ends up having a laugh at your cost. It should yield something. So does this joint declaration yield something? We don't know for sure. As they say, proof of the pudding lies in the eating. So the pudding is right now, I think all that's been done right now is the recipe for the pudding has been written and accepted and shared by the two sides. So we will analyze this or declutter this in 3 sections. 1, what we know for sure. 2, what we probably know and have enough evidence to be able to arrive at those conclusions with a little bit of guesswork. And number 3, we try and do some scenario mapping or some war gaming in terms of what do the Chinese want and where this might end up. So first of all, we will share the 5-point agreement or joint declaration on the screen. It will run slowly. You can see it. We'll also share it with you in the description. So for those of you who need it for academic reasons or for UPSC reasons, could have an easy access here. But let me also read a brief version of this, because these are things that we know for sure. This is the first joint declaration between the two sides, that too at a very high level, at the level of a member of the Cabinet Committee on Security on the Indian side, and on the Chinese side, not just the foreign minister, but also the gentleman who is a state councillor, which is very high up in Chinese Communist Party, but also is the country's special representative on border talks with India. There his counterpart is Ajit Doval, India's National Security Advisor. So this is a 5-point charter or statement that they have issued or declaration. 1, that both sides or officers or soldiers or everybody on either side will follow the consensus between their top leaders. In this case, Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping, that differences should not become disputes. Number 2, they both agree that the current situation is not in either side's interest, so the two sides should disengage militarily. 3, the two sides shall abide by all the previous protocols, agreements, understanding on the border, and I just list them for you for reference because there are 5 of them in a second. Number 4, both sides agree that all talk should go on, especially at the special representatives mechanism and also at what is called as WMCC. I'll explain it to you just now. WMCC on border affairs. And number 5, as situation eases, both sides should then engage to put in place more confidence building measures, that is more CBMs, so in future such distrust does not arise. Now if you read these 5, they sound like fantastic, but words are words and words are only as good as the intentions behind those words. Now number 3 is very important here, which says abide by all agreements and protocols, and that's why I had told you that I will go into it a little bit more detail. India and China have signed 5 protocols between 1993 and 2013. That is 20 years over the tenure of many prime ministers. And these are all about border management, all about avoiding the kind of situation that has now arisen in Ladakh. So what are these 5 agreements? The first one is 1993. It's called Agreement on Maintenance of Peace and Tranquility along the LAC. 1993, Narasimha Rao was the leader on the Indian side. 1996, Agreement on CBMs in military field along LAC. So second takes off from the first and takes it forward. So what was agreed in principle is now to be implemented at the military tactical level. Number 3 in 2005 was the protocol on the modalities of the implementation of CBMs in military field along LAC. Now you might find some similarity between 3 and 2. That's because 2, it's not just diplomatic talking around and round, but this is more like the first one said that the 2 sides wanted military CBMs. The 2005 agreement then codified those CBMs in terms of the principles the 2 sides will follow. 2012, Manmohan Singh is the Prime Minister of India. The next agreement comes, this is the agreement number 4, which is establishment of working mechanism for consultation and coordination on India-China border affairs. This is the WMCC I had just mentioned, and I told you I'll expand it for you. And then in 2013, there was a final agreement, Border Defense Cooperation Agreement. If you follow all these 5, then the kind of situation you have in Ladakh just wouldn't arise. So why is it that that situation has arisen? And can we now have a hope that this will not happen again, at least not in the near future? Which takes me to the section where I can talk about things that we almost certainly know with educated guesswork, etc., 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 but where either by way of ground knowledge or by way of good deductive logic, we are quite sure of what we are saying. So number 1 here, Chinese started this Depsang in Ladakh without a doubt. India did not start it. Also, this provocation did not start just the other day or in the month of April or May. In Depsang, this has been going on for more than 2 years now. Because the Chinese, they have not come and taken any territory in Depsang, but they've not been letting Indian patrols to go right up to their patrolling points for some time. And without occupying territory, they built roads coming into territory which both sides claim. And in fact, Mr. Ravi, who is now the governor of Nagaland, when he was part of the intelligence system, he wrote a paper where he mentioned a line in which he said that these roads were built into territory claimed by both sides and patrolled by both sides without, his words, without a scintilla of opposition from the Indian side. That didn't happen today, that happened in the past. So beginning with that, China has now expanded on this and expanded on this on the almost the entire eastern Ladakh, southeastern Ladakh theatre. So this initiative has been taken by the Chinese. This provocation is for them. Then from then you have to make some analysis of why they might be doing it. Number 2, the clash in Galwan. We know that the Chinese did not keep their promise of removing their tent, but kept the tent there. But we also know, in all honesty, that it was Indian troops who went and uprooted that tent and threw it away, and that led to a fight which led to deaths on both sides. These are two very tough armies. They can give as well as they can take. So that's what happened in Galwan. Number 3, Pangong. The Chinese move in Pangong seems to be quite decisive and quite a permanent one, because it's region between finger 2 and finger 8. Both sides claimed it, both sides patrolled it. China somewhat more frequently, say up to finger 4. India somewhat more frequently up to say finger 5. Then they somewhere came into confrontation with each other, showed each other the banners or the banner drill, and then went back. Now the Chinese have come right up to 4, and if India had not stopped it forcefully, they would have come to finger 2, which is their claim line. But in terms of what they have set up there, what they have built there, it looks like they don't have any intention of going back to finger 8, at least not in the short run. Number 4, we know that it's the Chinese who brought the heavy stuff ahead first. Tanks, armored vehicles, rocket launchers, heavy fighter flying. They carried out provocative flying against Indian unarmed helicopters in which Indian commanders were flying very early on. So they ratcheted up this tension to a certain level. They've also carried out much more psychological warfare, even as we talk. So Global Times is sharing these funny pictures of swarms of drones flying in to bring in fresh noodles and chopsticks and hot food for the Chinese soldiers, saying Indians will be eating out of tins. This is psychological warfare. So psychological warfare as well as the moving up of the heavy stuff, which I think is part of psychological warfare, both started by the Chinese. The important thing is everything that the Chinese have done, including the disappear of this 40 odd carrying these traditional Chinese weapons, guandaos I think they are called, these big sticks or iron rods with machetes on top of them, look like something pre-medieval, in fact, look like something from 2nd century AD. All that has been done deliberately and has been done in a way that it will be seen by the Indian side, it will be seen by commercial satellites, it will be shared widely in India and in the rest of the world. And number 5, very interesting, while the Chinese have done this in eastern Ladakh, they have not done any such stuff anywhere else. Nothing in Arunachal, nothing now in Sikkim, nothing now in the central sector, which is Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh. Now from these facts or fact-based presumptions that we make, and I feel quite safe in having made these, we have some conclusions that result from this. So what are these? Number 1, the Chinese don't look like they are after territory, because if they were after territory, why would they try to take this territory in Ladakh? In any case, their claim line is not much deeper than what the today's line of actual control is. Maybe in the odd area, but generally it is not. Second, this idea that they are doing it because they want Daulat Beg Oldi to protect their CPEC and those corridors, that's a bit mistaken, because when you look at the map, everything looks next door in the mountains. But in the mountains, everything is very far also. Dur ke dhol suhavne hote hain. Or maybe not very apt, but in Sanskrit we say Durta Parvata Ramya. So while you might think that Daulat Beg Oldi is next door to Karakoram Pass, it's not so easy. You can't cycle to Karakoram Pass from there. Also, the Chinese corridors don't go through Karakoram Pass. They go through Khunjira Pass much further away. Are the Chinese doing it to help the Pakistanis in Siachen? What is the percentage the Chinese have in doing something like that? I don't believe that a big power like China functions at that level. The Chinese have to be after something else. If really the Chinese wanted to put India off balance strategically, why would they do it in such a difficult area as Eastern Ladakh, where gains for them, if at all, will be very expensive and will have not so much strategic value? On the other hand, they could have just created trouble across Barahoti in Uttarakhand. That is their closest access, the most sensitive area for India in terms of access to the Indian heartland. And there again, there is a tiny sliver of disputed territory, or even Shipkila in Himachal Pradesh, which has a sliver of disputed territory. So Chinese had to basically start some trouble in any of those areas, and India would have been a lot more unbalanced strategically, also in terms of guessing China's intentions. That is not the intention. So the next conclusion that we need to draw from this is that whatever the Chinese were doing, Chinese were also doing in a way that won't risk casualties, because China is now too big a power to risk casualties in a border clash. Also because China has a client state, in this case Pakistan. If something happens, God forbid, push comes to the shove, they'd prefer a few Pakistanis to sacrifice their lives for them, not their own soldiers. So again, something that I'm not able to answer. Next, at the same time, the Chinese knew that this will risk trade ties, economic ties, goodwill for them in India for a very long time. Were they doing it just to create a little provocation, or just for a little bit of territory, say May Pangong from finger 8 to finger 4, if at all? I take that as the only new territory that the Chinese have taken so far. For that, will they risk all this? Sounds stupid. And one thing we know about the Chinese is the Chinese are not stupid. Fifth, will they do it to back Pakistan? Now, that's been my presumption early on, that the Chinese are giving India a message after Article 370 changes last year, and after our Home Minister's assertion in Parliament that we will go and get Aksai Chin, which may have been the case. But if that was the case, this has gone too far. And if this has gone too far, sort of unintentionally on either side, because that's how conflicts start, because the two sides fail to understand the other one's mind, and then they imagine the worst because we carry scars on our mind. That leads to trouble. If that is the case, then I will go by the assessment of our defense editor Snehesh Alex Philip, who in his column today says that now both Modi and Xi Jinping find a face saver out of it. If that's what they want, then this joint statement is not a bad idea. So we finally come to the question of what could it be? And now we are purely in the area of speculation, I would say educated speculation. Now, one, certainly it is not the Chinese telling India कि आप अमेरिका से दूर रहो, Quad से दूर रहो, because there are easier ways of saying that without risking the lives of your soldiers. Number two, are they trying to tell India who's the boss? I am not sure it was needed. I think everybody knows in the region who the boss is, and whatever any Indian may have said about Aksai Chin, nobody harbors any notions of marching on top of T-90 tanks or T-72 tanks and conquering Aksai Chin or Tibet anywhere. Was the idea to disbalance India strategically or to scare Modi? One aspect we just spoke about. Second, to scare Modi. I mean, the Chinese are again smart enough to know that there's only a limit to which an Indian leader can be seen to be getting pushed by the Chinese, because India is an open system. Facts come out here. You can't keep them hidden. Just as the Chinese can keep their own casualties hidden in Galwan, in India, these things cannot be done. So finally, is it because of some fear over Tibet? Now, India is quite committed to Chinese control over Tibet. And remember, there's been a series of agreements and protocols reaffirming that. And it's been a quid pro quo, because the last such reaffirmation from India was also accompanied by Chinese affirmation of acceptance of Sikkim being a part of India. So these are quid pro quos between big powers. So it's not as if India is going back on that commitment right immediately, because then China can also go back on the Sikkim commitment and other commitments. But I don't think any side intends to do that. So what do we make of all this? Is it all then talk? We said early on, talk, threaten. So is it just that? If so, what is the purpose? And if these talks are taking place, are they taking place in a linear manner, or are they taking place in the manner of a noodle ball like this, going round and round? Or maybe why should we Indians or our cuisine be left behind? Maybe they are just like a jalebi going like this. Once again, if you ask me, I would say that this is not a straight line. this is closer to a noodle bowl right now, because both countries know their strengths, both countries know their weaknesses, both countries know their limitations, both countries also are run by smart people. So let me just say in conclusion, let the ink dry on this joint statement and see how the talks between the two corps commanders go on, because ultimately it is what happens. The commanders will do what their directive from the political level is on either side. At the same time, what really matters is what is it that the commanders implement on the ground. So I think by Monday or Tuesday, this situation will have much greater clarity.